My son sat at the reading of the will with a smug little smile, the kind of smile that makes you want to wipe it clean off a person's face. He was certain, absolutely certain, that I'd walk out of this Denver law office with nothing from his mother's multi-million-dollar estate. Ryan had always been a master at posturing, dressed in an immaculate, tailored navy suit, his silk tie knotted to perfection, wearing that effortless arrogance you can only build from a lifetime of assuming the world was yours for the taking. Across the gleaming oak desk, Thomas Carter, Victoria's longtime attorney, cleared his throat. The air was thick, suffocating, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Outside, Colfax Avenue buzzed faintly, but in here the quiet was absolute, eerily tense, like a courtroom just before a sentence is read. "To my former husband, Jack Miller," Thomas began, his tone clipped and formal. Ryan didn't flinch. If anything, his smirk deepened, his posture loosening as though he'd already won. This, he thought, was the part where the lawyer would toss me a token mention before getting to the real air him. "I leave." Thomas's pause was deliberate, surgical. I caught the exact second Ryan's confidence cracked, his smirk twitched, his jaw went rigid, and his eyes sharpened with sudden uncertainty. Then came the words that shattered the room. Thomas's voice was calm, almost too calm as the shock hit like a sledgehammer. Ryan's face drained to chalk white, then flared crimson, rage boiling just beneath the surface. "That's a mistake," he barked, the fury in his voice bouncing hard against the walnut-paneled walls. Thomas didn't blink. "It's not a mistake, Ryan. This is exactly what your mother wanted." The scrape of Ryan's chair against the floor was sharp, violent. He shot up, shoulders squared, hands clenched into fists. "What the hell did you do to her, Dad?" His voice was venom, loud enough to make the receptionist down the hall flinch. And in that explosive moment, I knew this wasn't just a will reading anymore. This was war. If this story touched your heart, press 1 the comments. If you think it could have been handled differently, press 2. And I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? 2 days before that powder keg of a will reading blew apart in the attorney's office, I was in the cramped, aging kitchen of my Denver apartment, swiping at the coffee I'd just spilled when Maggie Brooks's voice tore through the thin wall like a circular saw gone rogue. "Your sprinklers are flooding my begonias again, Jack," she bellowed. I froze, watching the brown puddle snake toward my socks, clutching a dripping dish towel in my hand. 65 years old, and still mopping up messes some mine, some the universe's cruel little jokes. The new irrigation system I'd installed in our shared courtyard had one leaky joint, and every third morning it dumped half its water into Maggie's flower beds. I had been meaning to fix it, but Maggie's tolerance for imperfection could be measured in seconds, not days. That's when the phone rang shrill, insistent, refusing to be ignored. It clashed with Maggie's rant about property values and neighbors who don't care about anything but themselves. "Jack Miller speaking," I said, still pressing the towel into the spill. "Mr. Miller, this is Thomas Carter of Carter and Wells, downtown Denver." The name hit me like a chill draft from an open grave. It was formal, distant, and carried the weight of bad news you didn't want but couldn't dodge. "I'm calling regarding Victoria Hayes." Her full name, spoken aloud after so many years, punched the air from my lungs. "What about her?" I managed. "I'm sorry to inform you that Miss Hayes passed away Tuesday evening. The funeral will be Friday at St. Andrew's Memorial Chapel. After the service, there will be a reading of the will. You're named as a beneficiary." For a moment I thought I'd misheard him. Beneficiary? That was absurd. We'd been divorced for 15 years. She'd built Hayes Strategic Consulting into a multi-million-dollar powerhouse without a single brick laid by me. What in God's name could she possibly have left me? "I'll be there," I heard myself say, though my voice felt like it belonged to someone else. After hanging up, I collapsed into the rickety kitchen chair, staring at the old flip phone I'd stubbornly refused to replace. Dust floated in the late morning light like tiny suspended verdicts. Somewhere in the building, someone was hammering out sour notes on an out-of-tune piano. Her name yanked me backward through decades, to a snowy night in 1988, when I first saw her at the Riverside Grill. She stood in a red wool coat, taking the manager apart for refusing to hire women for the weekend shift. "You just assume women can't handle the pressure? That's ridiculous," she'd fired off, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Heads had turned. I was mid-bite into a slice of apple pie, watching her those sculpted cheekbones, that dark hair catching the fluorescent light, and the fire in her that made the whole diner feel electrified. Before leaving, she slid a business card across the counter, eyes locking with mine like she just dared me to call. I memorized her number before I could lose my nerve. 6 months later, I proposed in that same diner. A year after that, we were married under a September sky, swearing forever like we actually believed in it. Ryan came along 2 years later, a squirming, red-faced miracle that rewired our lives overnight. At first, we were just another couple, trying to make the puzzle pieces fit me at the power plant, her running a fledgling consulting gig from our kitchen table. But the business grew. So did the walls between us. The kitchen table became a granite island in a Hillcrest Avenue house. Quiet dinners morphed into glittering networking parties. Ryan learned how to shake hands with CEOs before he could drive. Somewhere in all of that, I stopped being her partner and became an accessory she dressed up or tucked away as the occasion demanded. I didn't know it then, but every choice, every distance, every unspoken resentment was pushing us toward a collision the kind that would erupt in front of our son under the watchful eyes of a lawyer with no way back. Victoria's rise from kitchen table consultant to CEO of Hayes Strategic Consulting was nothing short of a meteor strike. Brilliant, unstoppable, and leaving a trail of upheaval in its wake. In less than a decade, she transformed a handful of neighborhood contracts into a national powerhouse, pulling in clients from Wall Street to Silicon Valley. She was on stages in San Francisco, commanding panels in New York, and gracing the glossy cover of Denver Business Monthly as though she'd been born for it. Ryan didn't just adapt to that world, he thrived in it. By 10, he was swapping industry jargon with her clients over dessert. By 12, he was critiquing sommelier selections at restaurants I couldn't even get a reservation at. At 14, my suggestion of a camping trip in the Rockies earned me an eye roll that could have frozen a lake. He preferred Aspen, business retreats, and mingling with the children of people whose net worths made my annual salary look like pocket change. I told myself it was just adolescence. I clung to that illusion until his 15th birthday shattered it. I pictured a backyard barbecue, burgers, soda, friends from school, a lopsided homemade cake. Something warm, something real. Victoria had other ideas. She rented out the rooftop terrace of a luxury downtown hotel, live jazz trio, catered hors d'oeuvre, centerpieces taller than Ryan himself. The guest list read like a who's who of the Denver Chamber of Commerce. "This is embarrassing," I said the night before, watching staff set up crystal vases overflowing with orchids. "He's 15, Vic, not the CEO of a Fortune 500. She didn't look up from her phone. "He's growing up in a different world than we did, Jack. These connections matter." What about letting him be a kid?" Her eyes lifted, and for the first time I saw something hard and metallic behind them. Being just a kid is a luxury we can't afford him. Either we prepare him to win or we prepare him to lose. The party was flawless, her version of flawless. Ryan worked the crowd like a seasoned politician, swapping jokes with CEOs' kids, accepting gifts worth more than my first car. Designer watches. A mountain bike with a price tag that made my jaw clench. But then I caught him by the railing, looking out over the city lights. In that flicker of a moment, the mask slipped. He looked small, lost, like the boy who used to sleep on my chest after fishing trips. "You okay?" I asked. His smile snapped back into place. "Of course, Dad. Why wouldn't I be?" It broke something in me, watching him put on that armor. After that, it was a slow-motion disaster. Victoria's work devoured everything. Sunday dinners replaced by midnight conference calls. Vacations canceled for urgent deals. Ryan's baseball games forgotten for boardroom battles. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," she'd say. I did understand pressure, just not hers. Mine was keeping the city's power grid running through storms and heat waves. Hers was scaling higher, faster, no matter the human cost. By Ryan's high school graduation, he spoke in clipped efficiency, talked about leveraging opportunities, and looked at my life as though it were an exhibit in a museum of failures. One night, senior year, I snapped after Victoria missed the ceremony entirely for a deal in Chicago. "This is enough, Vic. Family has to come first sometimes." Without looking up from her tablet, she said, "Everything we have, everything Ryan's achieved is because of my work." And everything we've lost?" Her eyes flicked up, unflinching. Like what? Like us? Like being a family instead of a business? A long silence. Then, maybe it's time we stop pretending this is working. The divorce took 6 months. She kept the company, the house, most of the assets. I got the old starter home and enough cash to keep the lights on. Ryan didn't hesitate, he chose her. You're holding me back, Dad, he told me. This guilt trip about family values and living simply, it's toxic. We didn't speak for years. And then came the funeral. St. Andrew's Memorial Chapel in Boulder was a sea of black suits and designer heels, every seat filled with her people. I slipped into the back, wanting to disappear. Ryan saw me anyway. He cut through the aisle like a man who owned the room. "What are you doing here?" he hissed, loud enough for heads to swivel. "I came to pay my respects." You lost that right 15 years ago. She wouldn't want you here. Maybe not, but I needed to be. For what? To soothe your conscience? To put on a grieving widower act for people who know exactly what kind of husband you were? The chapel went still. 200 eyes pinned me in place. "I'm not here to cause trouble," I said. "I'll sit quietly in the back." "You'll leave now," he said louder. "You embarrassed her enough in life, don't disgrace her in death." I didn't move. He turned to the crowd, voice clear and cutting. "For those who don't know, this is Jack Miller, the man who spent 22 years holding back one of the most brilliant women Denver has ever seen." The sting of humiliation burned hot in my chest, but this time I wasn't walking out. Not yet. The service ended under a thin veil of polite applause for the eulogies, followed by murmurs about Victoria's brilliance, how she'd changed industries, shattered glass ceilings, built an empire. I stayed seated, staring at the polished floor, waiting until most of the mourners had drifted out. The last thing I wanted was another public scene with Ryan. But then Thomas Carter appeared at the end of my pew, immaculate, in a charcoal suit, leather briefcase in hand, his expression grave. "Mr. Miller," he said quietly, "I'll need a word with you regarding Miss Hayes's estate." Before I could respond, Ryan stepped in like he'd been lying in wait. His grief was perfectly staged, somber suit, lowered voice, but his eyes were pure calculation. Finally, he muttered, "I was wondering when we'd get to the important part." Thomas didn't flinch. "I'll need both of you in my office for the reading of your mother's will." Ryan's head turned sharply. "Both of us? Is that really necessary?" He gave a dismissive flick of his hand toward me. The kind of gesture you reserve for a stranger who's overstayed their welcome. "He's not—" "Your father is specifically named in the will," Thomas interrupted, firm enough to make the air shift. "His presence is legally required." I stared at him. Named in the will? That was about as likely as Victoria inviting me to Christmas dinner. "It's probably just a formality," I said, half to Thomas, half to Ryan. "You don't need me there." Thomas's gaze didn't waver. Mrs. Hayes was very specific about who should be present. Ryan's laugh was short, sharp, almost a bark. "Fine, let's get this over with." The walk from the chapel to Thomas's office was less than 10 minutes, but it felt like marching into a storm. The sky over the Front Range had turned a hard steel gray, snow clouds rolling in, the air tight with that strange electric pressure before the break. Ryan strode ahead, his gait full of ownership, as if this was merely the formal handoff of what was already his. Thomas's office was exactly the kind of place Victoria would have chosen for her lawyer. The top floor of a restored brick building on 17th Street, rich with dark wood trim, antique brass fixtures, and bookshelves lined with leather-bound volumes. Diplomas from Yale and Stanford hung alongside photos of Thomas shaking hands with governors, CEOs, and one former president. He gestured toward 2 leather chairs across from his mahogany desk. Ryan slid into the one directly opposite him, claiming the power position, leaving me just off to the side, a visual reminder of where he thought I belonged. "I want to express my condolences again," Thomas began, adjusting his glasses and opening a thick folder. "Victoria was more than a valued client, she was a friend." Ryan nodded, already bracing for the dollar figures. "This is the last will and testament of Victoria Hayes," Thomas read. "Executed on March 15th of this year, properly witnessed and notarized. It supersedes all previous wills." My stomach tightened. March 15th wasn't that long ago. Had she been planning for the end, or planning something else entirely? "I'll begin with the specific bequests," Thomas said. "To my beloved son, Ryan Hayes Miller, I leave the family residence at 1847 Hillcrest Avenue, including all furnishings, artwork, and personal property therein. Ryan's lips curved. The Hillcrest house alone was worth nearly $1 million. In addition, Thomas continued, I bequeath to Ryan the sum of $500,000 to be transferred from my primary investment account within 60 days of probate. $500,000 plus the house. Even I had to admit it was an impressive start. Then Thomas's voice shifted, just slightly. This bequest is contingent upon Ryan's continued employment with Hayes Strategic Consulting for a minimum of 2 years following the date of this will's execution, or until such time as the company is sold or dissolved. Ryan's smirk froze, confusion sliding into irritation. Sold? Why would the company be sold? Thomas's tone remained maddeningly neutral. I'm simply reading your mother's words. The storm outside hadn't broken yet, but in that office I could feel the pressure building, and Ryan's temper was about to snap. Ryan's brow knotted, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. This makes no sense. Mom would never sell the company. It was her life. Everything she worked for was in that business. Thomas didn't answer right away. Instead, he set the first page aside with deliberate care and picked up the next. The paper crackled in the stillness, the sound far louder than it should have been. There are additional provisions regarding the remainder of Miss Hayes's estate. I settled back in my chair, expecting the usual legal formalities, charitable donations, maybe stock distributions, nothing that would have my name anywhere near it. To my former husband, Jack Miller, Thomas began, his tone as steady as a metronome, I bequeath the sum of $33.5 million to be transferred from my primary investment accounts and securities portfolio. The numbers didn't make sense. My name didn't belong in the same sentence. $33.5 million. There must be a mistake, I said, the words tasting foreign. Did you just say, yes? Thomas replied without looking up. $33.5 million. The air in the room thickened, like someone had just sucked all the oxygen out of it. Ryan's face went ghost pale, then flushed crimson so quickly it was like watching a match flare. What did you just say? Thomas turned another page, and the next words hit like a hammer. In addition, I transfer to Jack Miller controlling interest 65% of Hayes Strategic Consulting, including all subsidiaries, real estate holdings, and business assets. This includes appointment as chairman of the board of directors. My stomach dropped straight to the floor. The company, the empire that had chewed up our marriage and spat out the pieces, the fortress Ryan had been groomed to inherit. She was giving it to me. Ryan exploded out of his chair, sending it skidding into the wall with a crack. This is impossible. She couldn't. I assure you, Ryan, Thomas said, his voice maddeningly calm. These are your mother's exact wishes. She reviewed every line herself and confirmed them repeatedly. Ryan's voice cracked, ragged with fury. You expect me to believe she just handed everything to him? The man who walked out? The man who abandoned us? I didn't abandon anyone, I said, my voice low but steady, though my hands felt like stone. Our marriage ended, but you took your payout and disappeared. Ryan jabbed a trembling finger at me. And now you're telling me she just forgot all that? That she gave you the company she built with her own hands? Number, you played her. You got inside her head when she was vulnerable. Oh, Ryan, Thomas cut in, steel edging into his voice. Your mother was of sound mind when this will was executed. She even underwent a full psychological evaluation to ensure it could not be contested. Ryan's fury was volcanic now. Then I'll contest it anyway. I want every meeting documented, every note examined. That won't change the outcome, Thomas said firmly. Her intentions were unambiguous. I sat frozen, the sheer magnitude of it pressing in on me. $33 million. Control of her company. From a woman who had spent years pushing me out of her life. Why? I asked finally, the question tearing out of me. Thomas's gaze softened just a fraction. She left a personal message for both of you. She instructed that it be read only after these provisions were made known. Ryan gave a short, bitter laugh. A personal message? For him? After what she's done to me? You've received a substantial inheritance, Thomas replied, his tone unyielding. $500,000 and a property worth close to $1 million is more than most people will see in their lifetime. Ryan's fists curled, knuckles white. Compared to what he's getting, you're talking about hundreds of millions in total assets. I wanted to tell him I hadn't asked for any of it, that I had no idea what I'd even do with it, but before I could, Thomas reached into his folder and pulled out a large envelope. My ex-wife's handwriting swept across the front in bold, confident strokes. Personal message. The room seemed to shrink around us. Outside, snow began to drift down in lazy spirals, tapping softly against the tall windows. This, Thomas said, placing the envelope on the desk between us, is where she explains everything. Thomas slid the envelope toward himself, breaking the seal with the kind of precision surgeons use on a chest. From inside, he drew several sheets of thick, cream-colored stationery. The handwriting hit me like a fist to the ribs, sharp, confident strokes, every loop deliberate. I hadn't seen it in years, but it was unmistakable. She asked me to read this aloud, Thomas said, his eyes moving between us. It's addressed to both of you. He began. My dearest Jack, if you're hearing this, I'm gone, and you're probably wondering if the universe has tilted off its axis. I can already picture your expression, the same one you wore when I moved the living room couch to the opposite wall without warning you. Confused, trying to hide it behind that stubborn politeness of yours. Despite everything, despite the lawyer, the will, the tension, I felt my lips twitch. I know this feels impossible. You're likely thinking you don't deserve the money, or the company, or any of this responsibility. But you do, Jack. You always did. You tried to save us. You tried to pull me back from the ledge when I was blinded by ambition. And I was too proud, too terrified of losing ground to listen. Thomas's tone didn't crack, but my vision blurred, the black ink swimming on the cream paper. Then she turned to Ryan. My brilliant, determined boy. I know you're seething right now. I can feel it from wherever I am. Maybe you've convinced yourself your father manipulated me, but you're wrong. You are not ready for this inheritance, not yet. You've lived inside the fortress of my success, enjoying its comforts without ever laying a single brick. You've never had to stand in the rain and wonder how you'd make rent. And you've spent 15 years aiming your anger at a man who didn't earn it. Ryan's shoulders stiffened, but his eyes stayed on the desk. Jack taught me about integrity, about the kind of strength that doesn't shout or perform. I forgot those lessons when I chose deals over dinners, profit over people, but I never forgot the man who taught them to me. My throat tightened, heat pressing behind my eyes. Her voice, even on paper, reached me from decades away. Ryan, I've left you more than most people ever dream of, not to coddle you, but to give you room to build something of your own. I want you to learn the value of $1 earned, not just $1 inherited. Learn to value people over profit, and learn to forgive your father for being human. Ryan's chest rose and fell sharply. Whether it was grief or pure fury, I couldn't tell. Jack, what I've left you is more than money, it's an opportunity. A chance to lead with compassion. A chance to use resources not as weapons, but as tools for good. I trust you because you never wanted any of this power, and because I know you'll never wield it to hurt the way I sometimes did. Thomas slowed as he reached the final lines, almost as if he wanted them to linger in the air a second longer. Love, always, Victoria. The silence that followed was thick enough to hear the snow kissing the window panes. I laced my fingers together in my lap, the weight of her words pressing into me. It wasn't just an inheritance. It was an admission. It was her finally seeing me after years of looking past me. Ryan's voice sliced through the stillness, low but edged with steel. She cut me out. For this? For a lecture about morals? You've received more than most people will ever see in their lifetime, Thomas said evenly. Ryan's head snapped toward him. Not compared to what he's getting. This isn't fair, it's theft. She wasn't thinking straight. Oh. She was perfectly clear-minded, Thomas replied, his tone carrying the weight of finality. And she wanted this moment to be crystal clear. Ryan's lips flattened into a hard, bloodless line. His glare locked on me, burning, but for the first time I thought I saw something flicker underneath the rage, something roar, almost unguarded. Not just anger, hurt. Ryan leaned forward, fingers digging into the edge of Thomas's desk hard enough to blanch his knuckles. I'll contest this. Mental incapacity. Undue influence. Fraud. There are ways to overturn a will. Thomas shook his head slowly, the motion deliberate. Your mother anticipated exactly that. She saw 2 separate, independent doctors, both certified she was of sound mind and acting under her own free will. That proves nothing, Ryan shot back, his voice sharp and fast. She was manipulated. His arm shot out, finger stabbing toward me like an accusation in a courtroom. He's been sitting in that dingy little Denver apartment for years, waiting for this moment to cash in. I held his stare. I didn't even know she was sick, Ryan. I didn't ask for any of this. Stop saying that. His shout ricocheted off the walnut-paneled walls, loud enough to make the window glass tremble. You're playing the humble card, but you've been circling like a vulture since the divorce. This was her choice, I said evenly, letting each word land. She raised me to take over that company. His voice cracked, the veneer slipping, exposing the rawness beneath. I gave up everything for it, relationships, friends, a life. And now she hands it to you? A retired plant worker who couldn't keep up? I leaned forward, the air between us charged. You think I don't know I failed her in some ways? I do. But she also knew you weren't ready to carry what she built, not without letting it consume you. Ryan gave a short, bitter laugh that held no humor. And you are? You don't know the first damn thing about running a company. Maybe not, I admitted. But I know the difference between using something to serve myself and using it to serve others. That's the part you never learned. His face twisted. So now you're the moral high ground? The savior? You think this makes you better than me? No, I said. It makes me accountable. Ryan's gaze darted to Thomas. This isn't over. I'll find a lawyer who will rip this apart. You're welcome to try, Thomas replied, calm but immovable. But your mother's wishes were explicit, and the legal foundation is airtight. I doubt any court would see it differently. Ryan swung back toward me, eyes blazing with a fury that was more than just about money. You took her from me when you left, and now you're taking her again. I let the silence sit, knowing that nothing I could say would erase the history behind those words. This wasn't just about an inheritance, it was about every crack in our family that had never been mended. My voice softened. She didn't do this to punish you. She did it to give you space, to figure out who you are without her shadow. I don't want her space, he said through clenched teeth. I wanted what was mine. That's the thing, I said, holding his gaze. What's yours now is the choice of what to do next. Not a company, not a fortune, just choice. Oh. His hands shook as he yanked his coat off the chair. You can keep your speeches. I'll see you in court. He stalked toward the door, stopping just long enough to throw one last look over his shoulder. This isn't finished. Yes, it is, I said, my voice steady in a way it hadn't been in years. It was finished the day she signed her name. What happens from here is on you. The door closed with a soft click that somehow echoed through the room. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hiss of the heating system and the muffled hum of snow-laden traffic outside. Thomas stacked the will documents in a precise pile, his movements unhurried. You handled that better than most would have, he said without looking up. I wasn't sure I had. My chest was heavy, full of all the years and words left unsaid. But under the ache was something unexpected, a calm certainty that, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't the one who needed to prove anything. Thomas slid the last folder into his briefcase, the leather creaking softly, and looked up at me. There will be paperwork to finalize account transfers, meetings with the board. The company's current leadership is strong. They can guide you through the transition. I nodded slowly, still absorbing the scope of what had just happened. Can I ask you something? Of course. Did she really still love me? After everything? For the first time all afternoon, Thomas's professional veneer softened into a genuine smile. Jack, every time we met, she found a way to bring you into the conversation. Not the divorce, not the disagreements about you, about the man who taught her that success without character is just an expensive failure. Make of that what you will. Oh, the words landed deep, somewhere I hadn't let myself feel in years. I slipped on my coat, carefully tucking Victoria's letter into the inside pocket, as if it were something fragile and alive, and stepped out into the fading Colorado light. Snow had begun falling in earnest now, a fine white veil that softened the edges of the world. The streets were hushed, muffled under the steady descent, the cold air sharp and clean in my lungs. I walked toward my car without hurrying, each exhaled breath visible in the dimming light, each step heavier with the weight of responsibility, and lighter with something else I hadn't expected. For the first time in 15 years, I didn't feel like the man who had been left behind. I wasn't a footnote in someone else's legacy. I had been chosen and trusted not because I'd fought for it, but because I could be trusted to use it well. Ryan's anger still echoed in my mind, and I knew the road ahead with him would be long, jagged, and uncertain. But I also knew something he didn't not yet. Sometimes the hardest gift to accept is the one that forces you to grow. At the curb, I stopped for a moment, watching snow collect on the hood of my battered old Honda. The letter in my pocket felt heavier than its weight in paper, like a compass, a reminder, maybe even a second chance. Justice, I realized, wasn't about payback or proving someone wrong. It was about recognition, about knowing that character outlasts credentials, that patience outlasts entitlement, and that real love, when it's real, never truly dies. Victoria had seen that, and in her final act, she'd given me the chance to prove her right. I started the car, the heater coughing reluctantly to life, and pulled away into the snowy Denver streets ready, for the first time in years, to begin again.